started. As you know, I like to start on time. So today I wanted to talk about the financial aspects of running a training grant. This is really good for the fund managers out there, not so much the coordinators, but the coordinators need to know like the policies as well. So, but there's a lot of changes that have occurred since we went from the legacy system to the new system. So I'll do my best in trying to explain it. Let's see. So I wanted to recap again. Last week, we talked about ex-train terminations and briefly touched on amendments. And the big takeaway here is if you're a business official and you're doing a termination is to always reconcile the numbers, making sure that whatever we are telling the NIH that we gave them the trainee this stipend amount that's how much we're paying them on the UCSD side. So that I think that's probably the biggest takeaway there. And the other big takeaway was that you have to initiate the terminations within 30 days. You're supposed to, I should say. You don't have to have them fully complete, but it's good to initiate them. It's a best practice. And then this was the whole process. And interesting, I think Carla, you came to me with a question. You just happened to have a question. I think it was on a fellowship, right?
Yeah, and yeah.
And it was just like right after I just done presenting it, and it was interesting because they don't have the business official, that's not in that process. This is for a T32 process. So it's kind of interesting. You would think, what's the difference, right? But NIH is weird. So like I thought I'm recording. So if anyone wants to tell NIH how weird I think they are, but anyway, so yeah, so this is the basic process there for the terminations. So today we're going to talk about, like I said, I'm going to try to cover as many aspects of the award management process as possible, and again, I think that the PowerPoint will be a good thing for you to go back on, and because you only do some of this stuff, like the first stuff once a year, it's hard to remember all the things that you do versus quarterly or monthly. So there are 4 categories that are on the award setup, and they're basically the 4 tasks. It's the training related expenses, which would be called institutional allowance if this is a fellowship. Travel is obligated within, or it's allocated, I should say, within the training related expenses. So that does not have its own task. Stipends is its own task, tuition and fees is its own task, and then childcare costs. Now, if you had an award that was set up prior to childcare costs becoming effective, you might have had like an amendment done and they added on that task. But initially, it was just set up with the 3 tasks, and then the childcare task was kind of like tacked on as a 4th task. And then everything is 8% burden rate, IDC rate, if you weren't familiar with that. So this is kind of, I guess, the visual. You have the award, the project, and then your 4 tasks. Here, again, your travel is allocated under your training related expenses. So looking at the notice of award is something that I like to do with people because it's just, again, research grants versus training grants, they look a little bit different. And then I always like to do this slide because I don't know if everybody knows this. Now, I wasn't taught this till much later in my career at UCSD, and I'm like, it would have been nice to know this, but I don't know if a lot of people understand, like, if you're reading a full grant number, what all the numbers mean. Like an application type is 1, that's new. If it had a 2 there, it's a renewal. A 3 would be a supplement. 5 is a non-competing continuation. A 7 is a transfer. So there's, I find it helpful you can look at it very quickly and go, oh, okay, this is a renewal award, or this is a non-competing continuation of type 5. And then we have here like the activity code. Now for us, we are mostly focused on T32s or F31s or something like that, or R25s, but this is your activity code. And then your institute or center code, this would be NIGMS, or it could be, you know, drug abuse or NIDDK or whatever, but that's what these letters mean. And then your serial number, this should be a unique number for every grant. And that is the 6 digits. Now, from what I used to be told, it used to be like 0, it could be 000. And that is the number of awards that have been made. So I remember I had one application or one award, and it was like 000 like 114. And that was basically, that was the 114th training grant that was issued by NIH, and he did not want to lose that serial number. And I'm like, well, you didn't get renewed, and we have to put it in as a new, so you're going to lose it. But so that's supposedly that's what that means. I don't know if that's still applicable. And then obviously the support year, if it's your year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then if for some reason you had submitted, you've got awarded on a resubmission, it would be like an A1. Some of you may go back, may remember you could do up to 2 resubmissions. So that was a long time ago, but they've now changed the rules since then. But anyway, I just like to add that slide in there in case you don't know all those little nuances and what all those numbers mean. That's what the numbers mean. So actually looking at a standard, you know, notice of grant award for a T32, this is how you're going to see it come in. You're going to see the child care costs come in. Now, the interesting thing I find about training grants is normally when you put in a budget for your RPPR or your renewal, you have to line item everything out, but you don't have to actually put in your budget that you want child care costs. It just automatically comes to you, which I find weird, but it's just how NIH is. So anyway, when you get your notice of grant award, it's going to show 10,000, which is $2,500 per trainee, and then your stipend amount, your tuition and fees amount, and your travel amount. And again, your travel is under the TRE task, and then I'm sorry, I kind of went backwards. So tuition fees, and then your training related expenses amount. So your training related expenses are going to be those 2 amounts together, the 5,600 plus the 4,800. And then which would give you your total direct cost amount with your F&A of 8%. And then that would be your total award budget. And if you see here, all of these 4 numbers here are the same. So, this could be different if you have like an unobligated balance, which I'm going to show you in the next slide. These numbers might be different. So in this particular case, everything that was awarded will be sent, and basically that federal action is what's going to be sent from NIH to us. So if you see here, I just kind of did a smaller version of this. The federal direct cost is 186,000 with your F&A, which that F&A seems really high. So I don't know, because that's more than 8%. But then your approved budget is this amount, the 228,000, but you have an unobligated balance for whatever reason is 5,560. So the amount of the award is going to be less. That unobligated balance is going to, what they say, offset that award amount. So these are just things that are slightly different than your research grants when you're reading your award, when your notices of award. So I wanted to look at like kind of each category, and then I'll go into like the nuances of some of the the nuances of each category as well. So training related expenses, and some of this is a little bit of a review from what I talked about a couple of weeks ago, but basically the things that are going to be charged to your training related expenses task are your pre-doc health insurance. If you have admin on your paid on your training grant, this is the task that they would be paid on. Their benefits and their salary would be paid on here. If you have like meetings once a month and you pay for pizzas or something, that might be paid on here. Honorariums or speaker fees, any kind of supplies. It could be a computer for the trainee or reagents or whatever's allocated for them, that would be charged here. The big thing to remember here is you use it or you lose it that year. So these training related expenses cannot be carried forward into the next year. You have to be very careful. And I should have put travel as would be something else that you would see under your training related expenses as well. But these expenses have to be expended during the budget year. Again, for travel, this is all allocated under that training related expense task. And there's two caveats that you want to remember. Travel that is not booked in the budget period is usually not allowed. Trainees must be appointed to the training grant at the time of the travel. And you have to remember, trainee travel is not considered a trainee cost, and therefore it may be rebudgeted without prior approval. So that's just within the TRE. If you're running over budget on, let's say, admin, you could in theory rebudget travel. It's all within the same task without any pre-approval from the agency. The big thing here is the travel must be booked in the budget period. If someone comes off of the grant June 30th and they decided they wanted to go on to, a conference in July, they cannot attend if they're not on the grant. I mean, the training grant's not going to pay for it. They could use other funds, but basically if they're off of the training grant, they came off of it and they want to go, like say the next month or 6 months, even if you put a lien in there, it doesn't matter like that. It's not going to be allowed. So for stipends, the expenditure code generally is, this is the 511002. Again, that has an 8% IDC rate, and it's usually categorized as the graduate and postdoc aid fellowship. Now, one thing to remember with, you have your pre-docs and your postdocs that are hitting on your stipend index, but because stipends for graduate students are paid out of the SAM system, they don't have benefits that follow it. And I'm probably going to lose some of you here, so I'll repeat myself. But when you have postdocs on the training grant, they are in UC Path. They are set up in UC Path, and the benefits follow the stipends. It's not like separated out. So basically, you remember, you can't have, the only expenses you can have on the stipend index are stipends, but the postdoc benefits follow the stipends. And so they're going to hit on the stipend index, but you need to move them off manually because there's no system that can like delineate the benefits charges versus the stipend charges. Does that make sense? And this only happens for the postdocs. Is anybody, am I losing anybody on that? Okay. Maybe not. Maybe you guys are all much smarter than I am. For me, it took me a long time to understand this. Like, why do they follow that, but they don't follow necessarily the pre-docs? Because the pre-docs are, it's set up in a different system. So again, your postdoc benefits, it's going to come in as one composite, the CBR rate, and it's going to post to the stipend task. But all those benefits need to be moved off. Now, some of those benefits are allowable and some of them are not. So I'll go over in the next slide which ones are allowable and which aren't. So the ones that are allowable need to be moved off to the stipend, from the stipend task, to the TRE task via a benefits cost transfer. And from what I'm told, this needs to be done at the department level. I know with the conversion, there was a time there when SPF was doing it, and I don't believe that's happening anymore. Maybe in some of you, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. But remember, you have unallowable and allowable benefits. The unallowable benefits need to come off the training grant completely, and you need to have a non-federal fund source provided either by the mentor or the department. Generally speaking, it's not going to be coming from the PD or PI. So say if Dr. Smith is the program director, he's not going to be picking up the unrestricted benefits. Not usually. Again, it's going to depend on your program and what was decided. Generally speaking, the mentor of the trainee is going to pick up the unallowable benefits and if there's any benefit overages for whatever reason. So this is one of those things that can go back and forth in emails because not everybody has a non-federal fund source. And so this is something that I try to tell people when you're appointing that trainee, try to get that fund source up front and make sure you can move, these types of, this is a non-federal fund source and it's completely unrestricted. Because sometimes if the person comes off of the grant, you're reconciling, and then that mentor is going to be in no hurry to get back to you and move off. He's not going to give you a fund source. It's easier if you try to get it up front. It's not always going to happen. So Holly put in here a good example here. So in medicine, it usually goes to either the mentor or the division. I mean, I think Holly, you could say it just depends on the program, right? It's all programmatic. And so chemistry might do it different than biology, versus CMM, whether it's, it just depends on the program. And so I can't say one of those consistency across the board, this is what happens, but anyway, regardless, the bottom line is unallowables need to be moved off completely. And your allowable benefits need to be moved onto the TRE task. So this is the list of all of the, whoops, got one a little bit fast. These are the disability, the life insurance, and the state workers' comp. All of these are considered unallowable, and they need to be moved off to that non-federal fund source. The rest of the benefits can be, moved to that TRE task. So I don't want to confuse you further, but before in the legacy system, we were able to move off by account code. And so it was a little bit easier because you could just pinpoint disability insurance, move that off. Now when they started the composite benefit rates, it's like a lump sum. And so you can't move off just by that expenditure type. So I believe and correct me if I'm wrong, the post-doc benefit CBR rate is 21.3% right now, but approximately 6.4% of that needs to be moved off because that's considered your unallowable rates. Now, I was trying to update this slide and make sure that these are correct. And that's what I'm not 100% sure these numbers are correct. So it's possible that, that amount that's moved off could be lower or higher. So don't hold me set in stone on that, but that's something you might want to check with your SPF analyst right before you're deciding to move your postdoc benefits. Make sure you have that correct amount of the total CBR rate. So I think also Kristen put a question in here. Has anyone successfully redirected their benefits? So I know it's possible to be done, or well, it was in the legacy system. And I don't know if that's something that they've worked out in the new system, Kristen. So, oh, Kristen, Itara, there's too many Kristens. Sorry. Okay. So anyway, sorry, I shouldn't look at the chat because it distracts me. But so basically you have to just remember that you have that you're moving off of a percent of unallowables. You're doing 2 moves. You're moving all of the postdoc benefits off of the stipend index. Some are going to the TRE and some are completely unallowable, which is that small percent there that are going to be going off to that non-federal fund source. And Kristen does have a great link in here, and I have a link to that as well, which is it's the START application, they call it, from SPF, and they go through it in even more detail. Whoops. Okay, I'm not paying attention to that anymore. So something else that follows stipend, when the stipends hit the stipend index, not just the benefits follow that, but also NGN and HSIT charges. So HSIT is health sciences IT charges, NGN are campus. So if you're in chemistry, you're not getting charged HSIT, but if you're in health sciences, you're getting charged both. So these are separate charges that must be moved again, just like those benefits, from the stipend task to, and I still have the word index in here, it shows you how old school I am, from the stipend task to the training related expenses. So you can contact, you can put in a ticket. I don't usually like to point people to ticket systems, but that's what the Blink says now. You can't, it used to be you can contact a person, you had a name with a face, but now you don't. So you can try to redirect and ahead of time. Now, whether that works completely, but normally I would say not, I don't know if I should say normally, but normally if it's not redirected, then you're just going to have to do this via benefits direct retro. And then on the ledger, the general ledger, it's going to show up as that 77002, the NGN communication recharge. And then for the HSIT, there's 2 different types of charges. Again, everything needs to be moved off of the stipend index to the training related. Now, sometimes, again, it's programmatic. Your program will make a deal with the department, and the department will like, oh, we're going to cover all the HSIT and NGN charges. And so then they may provide that fund source for you. And so again, you need to be clear based, with your really good communication with your PI, who's covering what, and try to do that up front if possible. So the tuition and fees task, generally speaking, tuition and fees are for your pre-docs, but in medicine and especially health sciences, a lot of our postdocs are required to take like CREST courses, and they're not necessarily in a degree seeking program. Some are, but it usually tends to be clinical, but part of their program is that they need to take certain courses. So you will see postdoc fees here, not just their benefits, but postdoc fees. And so these are all of the expenditure types that you might see that might be occurring on your tuition and fees task. And then IDC is not assessed on your tuition and fees. It's also not going to be assessed on your childcare, which I'm going to go through next. But so you have to kind of remember the IDC is going to be assessed on your training related expenses and your stipends, but not on your childcare and not on your tuition and fees. Speaking of childcare costs, so I have a whole web page on the website about this, and just to kind of go through everything. I haven't had to put in a reimbursement for this, so I've been taught the process, but I actually haven't had a chance to do it yet. So I would be interested to know if anyone else has. I don't know how popular, how much the trainees are taking advantage of this yet. So one thing to remember, the short-term trainees are not allowed to claim the child care cost credit. Any unused funds cannot be rebudgeted to another task or another category. And it has to be reported as an unobligated balance, which is basically just you have an allocation there that wasn't used. So if they sent you 10,000 in childcare costs and you didn't use any of it, all of it's going to be considered, you know, an unobligated balance, and it's going to be returned to the agency. The expenditure type shows up on your general ledger as 507405. And then I just put this in here again. NIH will offset any unused funds in future years, and they will basically adjust the amount as part of the closeout process. So again, this is kind of a newer thing. It's only started in the last couple of years, but I think that basically the thing to remember here is you use it or lose it. I mean, for this one, you cannot rebudget it. It's very restrictive. IDC is not assessed. So I did put links in here, which aren't really any good when you're watching a PowerPoint, right? But on the Pulse site, I talk all up in more detail about all the childcare costs. There's a form that the trainees need to do. And they have to have documentation on hand, but they don't necessarily need to turn it into the agency. So there is a process for them to get reimbursed. And then there's also SPF guidance here. And I believe this is again, what Kristen posted earlier to that start, which is, you have to log into that website under SPF, and it talks more about the guidance. I think more from the financial award side of things for the childcare costs. Is anybody done childcare costs, just out of curiosity?
I'm in the process of processing my first request now. I'm at the stage where SPF requires certification that the child care provider was licensed, like by the, and then that form. So that's where I'm at now. And then I understand that it's a one-time payment request with a snow ticket. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of curious, like, so I know they created the form, but I didn't know how easy the process was, how quick the reimbursement was, you know.
I'm thinking of adding it to our welcome packets so that the information about childcare goes out so that they know it exists. It hasn't been part of our.
So I don't think it's been widely advertised. I agree. I don't think it's been widely advertised. So I just don't know, like, if the program directors are telling their trainees, you know, I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like we're not, you know, we're not doing a lot of reimbursement. So, or maybe there's just not a lot of, you know, trainees with kids. I don't know. Just childcare costs considered like husband costs? No, probably not. I know. Okay, so let's talk about rebudgeting. Rebudgeting, you may have heard that rebudgeting is a little bit trickier with the training grants, and it is. So this is my little exhibit, I guess my visual picture of what the rebudgeting guidelines are. So I kind of put childcare costs just off to the side because that's just, you can't do anything with that. There's no rebudgeting there whatsoever. So if you see these, you see up here training related expenses. These are basically your 3 tasks, or this is your 4th task, but you can see here there's a line here and you see the arrow. So training, if you have training related expenses that are not used, you could rebudget them to fees, or you could rebudget them to stipends. If you're going across here, stipends to fees, fees to stipends, the arrows go both ways. Now notice the arrows don't go up. So if you have extra money in your fees and you have a deficit here in your training related expenses, you cannot move money up. So you can move money down, you can move money across, but you can't move money up. Only if you have like prior approval from the IC. I mean, you would have to write a whole letter and get that all approved. I've seen it happen. I've seen them approved a lot of the time. Say if you write a great budget justification, hey, the benefits are just crazy expensive, you know, and we have a positive amount in fees. Could we please use it? You're gonna, you know, it's gonna be, you know, a formal letter that you're gonna have to submit. And it's not always approved. I would say maybe 75%, 80% is approved. But it's always a gamble, you know, when you do that. So, but for in generally speaking terms, no, you're not going to be able to, if you have that, a deficit in the training related expenses, which is oftentimes you're not going to, and you have a positive amount in fees or stipends, you're not going to be able to move that money up. So remember, your postdoc benefits are charged to the training related expenses task. And benefits always seem to be costly, right? And so you have a lot of things being paid out of those training related expenses. And so it does tend to be, you have to monitor that task very closely as far as what your projected budget is. So generally speaking, your budget shortfalls are usually in the training related expenses. So I just have a couple questions here. So can tuition and fees be rebudgeted to training related expenses? No, right? Look at the arrows. So nothing can go up. Can stipends be rebudgeted to training related expenses? Nope, nothing can go up, right? Can stipends be rebudgeted to fees? Yep. And vice versa. Can fees be rebudgeted to stipends? You guys got that, right? But can training related expenses be rebudgeted to stipends and fees? Yes, you can send money down, but generally speaking, in that training related expenses category, you don't have any extra funds. And you normally don't have huge deficits or whatever in stipends and fees. The only reason why you would have like maybe a stipend deficit was, say you had in your original budget, you proposed for 2 level 1 postdocs and you hired a level 1 postdoc and you hired a level 2 postdoc. Well, that's a higher postdoc amount, right? That's a higher stipend amount. So then, yes, you might have, you know, for whatever reason, you might have a deficit there. So if you did have extra fees, you could cover that deficit in stipends or training related expenses. You could move, you know, some money down to cover that deficit. So this is my little quiz of the day. So I'm trying to ask you, what is the FER balance here? So if you have a negative $500 in your training related expenses, you have a negative in $250 for fees, and you have $1,000 positive in stipend. So what would be your balance? Does anybody want to take a stab at this? Just go ahead and unmute yourself.
I want to say 750 because the training related expenses deficit can't be covered by the stipend excess.
Exactly. I think who's that, Marisol?
Yes.
Good job. Okay, you're right. So you can rebudget, right? From fees to stipends, and then that would take that, your balance there would be 750, but then that 500 at the top needs to be moved off to unrestricted funds. So those are always the difficult conversations when you have you know, you have, this is something that you have to go back to the PI and say, we have a deficit, and usually $500. I would be happy to see a deficit that small. I mean, I've seen it much larger, and so you have to have that difficult conversation going, okay, we ran over budget, we need, you know, this moved off. And he's going to go, well, where's the deficit from? Is it because of, you know, we ate too much pizza, we paid too much, we paid the admin too much, or is it, you know, maybe one trainee spent too much money of their allocation? They're going to ask you, they're going to want the details on that and go, where is that? Where's exactly that deficit? Because you know, if you have a mentor that is probably going to get forced to pick that up. But again, the project director doesn't want to have to pick it up. The department's not going to want to pick it up. They're always going to want to kind of push it off onto the mentor, which, you know, it's just part of the game. So But that is just, something that I try to avoid as much as possible, but I can tell you, and I know there's a lot of people on this call, like, if you had a $500 deficit, I'd be like, whoo, that's nothing. But, yeah, it's usually much higher than that, so. But so your true FER balance would be $750, because when SPF submits this to the agency, they can't submit with the deficit. So they're gonna say, okay, you're gonna move off that 500, and then 750 is gonna be reported to the agency. That's gonna be the balance on the agency side. And that is gonna be an unobligated balance. So just a reminder, remember, a balance in stipends or fees, it will need to be reported to the agency, even if the overall fund is in deficit. A balance in stipends or fees cannot be used to cover your training related expenses deficits. Again, only if you do a special request. And like I said, I have, if you ever want to do one and you need a letter template, I'll be more than happy to give you one, but it is a long drawn out process, and whether the PO is going to approve it, whether they have money to approve it. So try to avoid that by really keeping good projections on that training related expenses tax. It's just a really, I can't stress it enough. Okay, so there's two things we're going to talk about next: unliquidated expenses or obligations. I know SPF likes to call it obligations. I like to call it unliquidated expenses. It's a kind of a verbiage thing. And then there's unobligated expenses. There's two different things. There's obligated and unobligated. So your unliquidated expenses or obligations, remember how we talked a couple weeks ago that a trainee could be appointed to the training grant, not necessarily within the budget year, but they could be appointed, anytime in that budget year, but they're 12 months, they have to be paid a full 12 months of stipend. So that is considered what we call unliquidated expenses. It's obligated money, but it hasn't been liquidated yet. So it's unliquidated at this point. So this is not restricted. And then the expenses are incurred but not paid within the budget period, right? So we know the trainee, if they're stay on the training grant, say they're appointed halfway into the training year, 6 months into the year, and then 6 months of it is paid during the current budget year, but then say 6 months is going to be paid after the current budget year. But those are incurred expenses, and it's just a matter of difference between the appointment periods and the budget periods. This is not considered an unobligated. This is just an unliquidated expense. So there's 4 different things that can be considered an unliquidated expense. Obviously, your stipends, right? If you have tuition and fees that follow, for either a pre-doc or a postdoc, you can put that on your FER as an unliquidated expense. Pre-docs and postdoc benefits are considered an unliquidated expense in the TRE task. And then childcare costs. So say if you had a childcare reimbursement for whatever reason, that can be an unliquidated expense as well. So I kind of just went through this, but again, trainees can be appointed anytime during that budget year. And I know there's some of you on the call that you have PIs that put them on the training grant the last day of that budget year. And so then that basically their entire stipend and their benefits or their tuition and fees is all what unliquidated expenses. So it's really important to keep track of your budget periods versus when the trainees are actually appointed. So if you have a larger training grant with like 12 different trainees, or you really have to keep a really good Excel spreadsheet And because sometimes they start all different times of the year. There are some programs I know out there that they all start July 1 and there's no unliquidated expenses. Hallelujah, amen. But there's not a whole lot of you out there. Most of them are staggered, especially with the postdocs, because the postdocs, sometimes it's just hard to fill these slots. And so they're a little bit more transitory than your average grad student. A grad student's here for 6 or 7 years. A postdoc may only be here for 1 or 2 or 3 years. So basically what I'm saying is just, you have to track this. And remember, you're going to have this budget period, but within the total project period, it's 5 years. And you're going to have your next budget period and it's overlapping. So it can be very complicated when it comes to unliquidated expenses. And I can't stress this to you enough, how many times I've seen it happen when you have a fund manager that has never been trained on training grants, and they treat it just like a research grant, and they don't realize that they need to put in these unliquidated expenses. And I'll go back and look at the FFR, which is the report that SPF submits to the agency, and no unliquidated expenses are listed. And I'm like, wait, you have 2 trainees, at $50,000 a year. Well, no wonder we're going to be $100,000 in deficit. I mean, so if it's not listed on there, it's not going to be, it's listed as an unobligated expense, and it should be considered an unliquidated expense. So this is just, again, my little spreadsheet that I would keep, how I would keep track of the trainees. And this is just, again, for one budget year, and there could be up to 5 budget years, right, in a project period. So you have to really be careful of making sure that, okay, you're submitting the correct amount for your unliquidated expenses. And then you also have to take into account, like, say Claire Dunphy here, she's going to be appointed for 2 years. Usually they're appointed for 2 years, not always. It depends on the program, right? That's all programmatic. Some are appointed for 3 years. And so it could get very wonky tracking everything. And it's like I said, all I can say is just, you need to be detail oriented and really watch what you're doing here. Because if anything, you just want to avoid any major deficits, right? That's just the name of the game. And everybody hates those conversations with the PI that they're like, oh, I have to cover this huge deficit because it wasn't managed correctly. So this is just basically what, not all of you see this, but some of you see this on occasion. This is what the SPF submits to the agency. And you can see here the federal share of unliquidated obligations. So they're saying this is stipends and, maybe benefits that are going to be incurring after the end of the budget period, but they are, obligations to this budget period. But as opposed to unobligated expenses, there is no automatic carry forward on training grants. If you don't spend it, you lose it. So if for some reason, say you don't, you have 4 slots and you only fill 3 slots, all that money for that 4 slot is you lose it, and it's going to be considered restricted. And so it's unobligated. You did not use it, you're done. It's not like a research grant. So this is what it looks like on the FFR here. And so you can see here, there's your unliquidated expenses, and then there's your unobligated. So it's very, very distinctively different, 2 different lines there. And so usually when it comes to forensic accounting, when, I don't know, everybody's done this. When you start a new job on campus and you get slapped, oh, you got a training grant on your desk, and you have to go in and clean up. You have to understand why, there's a deficit, what the problems are, and you have to go in and do this forensic accounting. And the first thing I'll do is I'll look up and go, how much in liquidated obligations did they put on the FFR? What was turned into the agency? oh, look, nothing, and you're in trouble right there. And so, it's, yeah, Kristen, I feel your pain. It's really difficult. And you have to go back and look at every single detail of all of your pre-docs. You have to know all of the, all their names and go through all the general ledgers and say, okay, what were they actually paid and what were the unliquidated obligations? You know, and you have staff turnover all the time, right? And someone's keeping this great training grant spreadsheet up, but then when the new person comes in, you know, for whatever reason that doesn't get handed off to them, we see this happen all the time. And so, or, you know, or the research administrator just isn't told, you know, look, this is not, don't treat this as a research grant, treat it as a training grant, which is much different guidelines. So I can't stress that enough. So it's 12:46. I've just been chatting away. So this is just a summary of basically what's charged IDC, the expenditure types. I don't know if this is helpful. You know, I thought this was kind of cool. As far as, you know, kind of keeping things straight, especially with the expenditure types, knowing what to look for. So, I mean, it's just really important to look on when you're reconciling your training grant, and that should be every month, right? Knowing, okay, I see a funny account code on the tuition and fees. It's not one of these, you know, 551s, it's something else. And then you're like, oh, wait, maybe that's not allowed there. And maybe that was charged there by mistake. And so you need to move it off. But making sure all your ducks are in a row, I guess I could say, as far as what is expended and where it's expended. It's just really important to kind of keep on top of all that. One thing I wanted to mention about the postdoc benefits. Now, I know people do this differently, and again, it's a process thing. I've seen some fund managers, they will go in every single month and do a cost transfer and move off those benefit amounts, move it off the stipends. Every single month, they'll move it off. Then I see them, you know, some fund managers, they wait to the end of the year and they just move off everything in bulk. And but remember, when you do that, you know, you have to, you're going to be comparing what Oracle to your spreadsheet and vice versa, right? And so you're going to need to take into account all these different expenditures, especially for the benefits, because that's a big chunk. And then you have your unallowable versus your allowable expenses. So, okay, so I'm going to quit talking. That's possible. And can I go through the chat? Holly, I know you and Kristen put some stuff in here in the chat, the Kristens, I should say. Is there something we need to touch on here? I think I covered that one, Holly.
Yeah, I think you did.
As far as childcare costs, yeah, that's really important. They can't be used for anything else. It's very restrictive just for childcare costs. If you use it, great. If not, you completely lose it. Has anybody successfully redirected their benefits? So with the conversion, Kristen, I don't know. I haven't really talked to anyone, and maybe Kristen Itahara. Have you been able to successfly, how do you say it?
Itahara.
Itahara. Okay. So Kristen I versus Kristen W. Have you been, if anyone could do this, I would think it would be you.
I only have done it through the spreadsheet that we send to SPF.
Oh,
yeah. So, and I haven't tried to do it through UC Path yet. Yeah, so sorry, but
no, it's not, don't be sorry. I'm just kind of curious if it,
yeah, there's the KBA on that website, but yeah, I haven't even tried and looked through it. It's been on my mind though, that I need to do it.
Oh, so did you say that there's a KBA for the UC Path process to do this?
Yes, it looks like
Ooh.
it. So if you go to that start, yeah, and then click on that link on the bottom, benefit cost transfer. Yeah. Oh. So under the bullet the rates that you would move off, the percentages, and the last sentence, it's recommended that a benefit
Ah.
cost transfer. Click on that link, and I think that's the KBA for it. That's what it looked like, but I didn't really get to,
Yeah, looks like it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh.
so it's a step by step.
Can you slap that link in the chat? I want it.
Kristen, you were saying that you
Neat.
also submitted like, just an Excel spreadsheet to SPF, or are they still doing that? Or,
I mean, it doesn't look like it now. I haven't reached out to Wella for like an
okay,
update. But I
I thought we were
think,
trying to get away from that, but maybe not.
yeah,
wish
I
there was
don't
a
know.
way they could do it, because I feel like this is such a problem, and with all the stuff we're trying to track, like I have so much to clean up on all of those, and it's just hard to keep up. Like, even, I guess I could do it as a year-end thing, or maybe a couple months before our PPR is due, but it's just, and I do try to track like what's still gonna be coming down the pipes, but it's really hard to keep up with it.
Yeah, I understand your pain, Kristen.
Jill, do you have a best practice as to when you would typically do these benefit cost transfers, like quarterly?
You know,
We had
it
post.
really just depends.
Yeah, yeah.
I used to do it like, be really on top of it and do it like quarterly. And then I was like, you know what, why am I doing this quarterly? Why don't I just do it once a week?
Right. Yeah.
See, the problem is if you do it quarterly, then that spreadsheet that you're keeping, some has already been moved off.
Right.
Some hasn't, right? Your future
Right.
projected. So if you just do one projection for the whole year and then just move it off at the end of the year, I find that easier.
Easier. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's what I'm doing.
again,
Yeah.
Everybody's different, and there might be somebody else out there with a better best practice than me. So that's just been my experience. But I look at you guys a lot. You guys come up with these really great ideas, especially like Maddie. You used to work with Maddie.
Oh, yeah.
And I would be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I didn't think of that. So yeah, I prefer just to do it at the end of the year when you're doing the FER, because it's just easier. And then you don't have to know, okay, well, what has been moved, what hasn't been moved, and then you just know nothing's been moved yet, and we'll do it later. Okay, so Patsy, you have a question about processing a direct retro from salary grant support to stipends. Is this possible? No. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, it's okay.
So do you have a situation? Tell me your situation. I think I know what it is, but tell me your
So
situation.
the situation was that we have a person who was approved retroactively to be funded on a Train 32. And it's a whole fiscal year starting from July 2022 for 12 months. And due to being understaffed and a plethora of tasks, we haven't been able to do this yet, and we're not exactly sure if this can be done.
Generally, so you can't, because stipends don't have taxes taken out, and salary from a grant support does. You can't cross tax years for starters. That's a good question, Kristen. So yeah, normally the old system, the legacy system, you'd have to go in and do, what was that? You'd have to do why am I blanking on names? A transaction. I can't think of the name, but now, yeah, you would have to go back and do a bulk transfer. But I don't know. Has anybody done this recently? Is there able to? And so, Patsy, can I confirm? Were they appointed at the NIH with the NIH?
I believe so, yes. And I believe that was done through like a carry forward letter, which stated it was going to be retroactive.
Oh, whose grant is this?
This is a Train 32. Give me 1 second. I believe it's Dr. Turner is a PI.
You're in psychiatry, right?
Yes. Yeah, this used to be managed by Megan, but she left the department.
So no, this is an R25, isn't it?
No, this is a train 32. Sorry, give me
Oh,
one.
this is, okay, I'm thinking of a different, her other one. Okay. Yeah, so that might be, something that we could talk about further, but I know, I'm gonna put her name out there and she's not on here, Julie Wilkes. Or Holly, have you done this lately? So I know
No,
Julie Wilkes is really, she's very proficient in this process.
How far back is it? Is this person still active?
Yes, this person is still active and it has to be from July of 2022.
So we're doing this on a few fronts because we're finding issues with ARC where, like, I don't know if anybody else does funding entries in ARC, but they don't differentiate between positions. So if people don't tell them to update postdoc employee versus postdoc fellow, I've noticed they do both, which is insane. And it's like really freaking me out. But for the ones that are recent, the home or the hiring department, we work with the hiring department to reach out to ARC to switch them from stipend, salary to stipend, which of course screws things up because they're now going to, a taxable salary to not taxable. And it's a really long process. And then the older ones that I'm looking into on a training grant that ended, I'm on another fellowship that we ran into this, we basically had to change the account codes with permission from Central Campus to change it from salary to stipend and just have it as a, just be like, this is what it is and move on. I'm going to try to find, I need to do that for another one, and I'm going to find the direction from my supervisor on how to do that. And then maybe the next week's office hours, I can bring more information on what I've done for the older ones. But I think for the newer one with July 2022, it's an ARC situation with the hiring department.
Okay, this is very helpful. Yeah, we can touch bases on this next week.
Yeah, I'll try to get more information on the older stuff, but yeah, definitely work with the hiring department and ARC. And we have quite a few cases open, unfortunately, where we're dealing with this, and it takes a while for them to situate and update everything.
I see. And they need to reclassify from postdoc employee to postdoc fellow?
Yes, like
Okay.
the stipend, because it needs to be paid out as stipend. And that's important in the dopes. When you're looking at your dopes, especially if you ever have a postdoc, always show your account codes and your position title, so you know what's being paid as stipend versus salary. I mean, I'm seeing R01s being charged fellow, things, and it's just crazy. Like, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I think we need a wine happy hour to cope with all this. We should have that from 1 to 2, right after the office hours. Right? Right? You're laughing, Holly. It's true. This stuff is crazy. So I know it's the top of the hour. I talked a little long today. I apologize, but I know there's more questions, and we can do, this stuff kind of comes up a lot. The one thing that I don't have as a resource for you is I don't have a super duper great spreadsheet. I have spreadsheets, but they're like super complicated spreadsheets that it's hard to give to someone else to say, here, track your trainees with this. I've tried to do that with the legacy system and the new system, but it's like so complicated. So that is just something that it's a challenge to be able to manage these, consistently across the board. I don't know, Holly, what are you guys using for? Do you have a super duper spreadsheet to manage all this?
we have a super duper reconciliation spreadsheet that we have not fully implemented in the use we intend, which is to update everything monthly. But the massive spreadsheet that we have to do all the math and track all that information is impressive enough that it terrified Dr. Ross. So
Yeah. No, Uh-huh, I totally get it.
I would
Quite
love to
good.
share on this because I've been basically building a report from scratch, like, because these are handled so differently than normal grants. And
Let me get
I'd
you,
love feedback and maybe, yeah.
I'm
Cause
gonna
And I
drop,
can send you mine too, Kristen. I mean, and we tried to, but one time we tried to download all of the financial link data, we put it in there. Then we started doing that with Oracle. And then we realized, there was just, it's just a complicated process to do that. And
oh
so
yeah,
I wish and now RSC, we don't have our own, really that's all under BI now, under the dean's office. So we don't have a dedicated person to build me something like that. I'm just not.
I'm also wondering too, like, cause I know recently they've done, well, we were talking about this today. I know with subawards now, like when we're a sub, they're setting up the subawards year by year on each project now. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this. Because of the restrictive nature of these, subawards and like if you have carry forward or not. And I almost wonder if because of how training grants are run, if we could just pre-set up, like if your grant's 4 or 5 years, you have a project for each year that tracks it that way. And then,
Yeah, I think they're
I
trying to
know.
get, honestly, I don't think they don't want to do it year by year.
Oh, really?
it's
Yeah, that's what I
excruciating.
understand. I'm
It's
sorry.
I was just gonna say, I can't see that actually working because it's excruciating to move from, a prior budget segment of 5 years over to the new budget segment when you have trainees from the last budget year still on the same, it's
Yeah,
excruciatingly
they didn't like
painful.
doing it with the legacy system. I mean, they wanted you to, because some people would create new,
Well, I mean, in this case, like what SPF's doing is as soon as something's awarded, if we've got a 3-year subaward, they're creating the project numbers right away for each budget year. So they're already set up so that you're not going to be interrupted switching them from one to the other.
Interesting.
The
Yeah.
project number for year 2 is immediately ready, so you can automatically add that in without interruption and easily track what's going where. And
Wow.
I think I think this could work really well for training grants if we can just pre-set up those projects just like our subawards, because I'm finding it's working really well with our subaward grants.
actually,
And
that's very interesting.
That is. Now that you say it out loud and talk through
Yeah,
how that would work,
'cause
I'm like, oh my
I'm trying to
God.
visualize this in my head because they've always been against that, but now
no,
that-
yeah,
it's
Yeah.
interesting that they're doing it with the subs, that they might. Yeah, there might be a good solution there.
maybe I'll-
The problem was another, overall project, especially when we went to Orville, like they were so concerned for years, just trying to figure out how to do research grants in Oracle. Then the subawards, remember the huge subaward mess we had? And then like Trinity just get pushed to the bottom, like we're like the bottom feeders of.
Because everybody
grants.
touches them only, I mean, with the
Yeah.
exceptions of some of the rest of us.
So it's like
Most
you
people
try to
only
get an
touch it once
answer,
a
okay,
year.
how do we do this? What's gonna be the, the new policy? Everyone
I
just.
might email Jory at SPF.
Good
I don't know who
idea.
else, or maybe Wella, and see if I could like put this in their ear and see what they think. Because I feel like the way training grants, or just the way I'm seeing these are run, they're so similar to the subaward process, or like that restrictive nature and going from budget year to budget year. It would make it so easy to visually see, as long as we have those project numbers set up ahead of time, you can just immediately switch your postdocs and your pre-docs to a new thing. And I know that, well, I've heard that the student stipends are going to be going to UC Path now too, which
Yeah, that's good
cautiously
coming down the
scared
pipe
of,
too.
but
Yeah,
might be a good thing. I don't know.
who
I don't
knows?
know.
Yeah, I know.
Anyways, just a thought like that dawned on me while we were talking about this today.
Did anybody
you,
provide
guys.
a projected date for the student stipends to move to UC Path? Because that's a massive pain in my rear.
I talk to Tamara every once in a while and I haven't heard yet.
Mm.
They
Glenn
said
told me
they
it
were
was fall.
shooting. They said they were shooting for fall, but I
Yeah.
really don't.
Mm.
That's what I
Thank
heard too, Kristen, but I don't think.
I don't think it's gonna happen. Yeah.
Like everything else UC Path had shot for years. Yeah. Sorry.
It's like,
So
It
this-
was
that-
recorded.
Oh, sorry. Going back to the like a new project number for each year. We've actually done like a new task for each year, but a new task. So under so each year we would have a task for stipends. We have a task for fees, TRE, and whatever else. And each year we would get a new task number. So that way we could keep the years separate and each like
So you
stipend.
get 4 new tasks for each. year.
Yes, we did.
That
But
would be
then,
Wait, you did, you mean in the legacy system?
yeah.
The
but-
legacy system, yeah, but
but
not,
now,
Oracle,
no,
right?
not
would be like
now. We got a
12
a lot
tasks.
of push.
Oh,
Yes.
I mean, no, for 5 years, it would be
It was,
20
it was a
tasks.
lot, but it helped with the stipends and fees and kind of keeping it year to year, especially with the postdocs and their unliquidated balances. And so that was helpful, but they pushed back. Like SPF said, no, it's just gonna
They're
be-
really, they do not like doing that, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think maybe we need to do an office hours of just having Wella.
Yes.
Ooh.
Here.
I would love that. I would love
Yes.
to
Yes.
pick the brain on
Agreed.
that.
So let me see, oh, so I didn't plan on having a office hours next week because of the staff picnic. I
yeah.
don't know if anyone's going to that, but, so I was gonna skip next week, but maybe the following week, I'll see if Well is available, or that would be the 24th, right? Let me see if she's available, because it'd be great to have her just ask, can we, what, pick her brain, or why haven't we done this, or whatever, because I think Kristen, the Kristens and Holly, you guys have some great ideas, so.
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you. That would be awesome, just to pick their brain and yeah, thank you.
That would be super helpful.
107, I think we need to kind of wrap it up. Patsy, did we answer your question fully? Are you gonna be able to reconcile that situation?
As of now, yes. I'm gonna see what, I'm gonna contact ARC and see what-
Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit of a pain.
yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let me know if I can do anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great week,
Okay.
weekend.
Have a great
Great,
week.
Jill. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.